The entire government of the United States had become a shambles. Let me remind you, in the previous 20 years, you had the greatest economic crisis since the 1930s, brought on by bad American policy, both parties, both branches of government. You had virtually the entire conventional land forces capability of the United States militarily mired in the Middle East for 15 years in order chiefly to hand over the main influence over Iraq to Iran, which is the last thing they wanted. He produced this humanitarian crisis where millions of desperate people were scrambling for their lives and turning up on the shores of Italy and into Central Europe and so forth, all caused by utter incompetence in American policymaking.
It's a war, and it's a war that he's winning right now, and that's why you see the desperation, the flailing hysteria from the left, and this alarming uptick in violent rhetoric. That's Conrad Black, a former Bilderberg member, former Bilderberg steering committee member, laying it down the line and actually coming over to the light side and pointing out that Trump is at war with the deep state, with the establishment, and that he's winning.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
It is the final segment of the fourth hour. War Room is coming up at the top of the hour. We're going to go to this Conrad Black video here in a second. Headline up on InfoWars, Conrad Black, Trump is winning a bloodless civil war against the establishment. But first I want to read just a small passage from John Nolte's article out of Breitbart today, again talking about why we're seeing this heightened hysterical rhetoric from the left. Because again, as I pointed out, every time a leftist promotes extremism and violence, as Splinter News did yesterday, and then the New York Times lied about it and said, no left-wing website's ever doing this. Literally, they did it on the same day. Again, when they do this, it puts another reasonable-minded person off voting for Democrats. This is not a vote-winning strategy to act crazy, to throw your toys out of the pram every time something doesn't go your way. Get an actual platform like Trump got. That's how he won the election. Again, this whole crisis of democracy mantra, the only crisis is within you and within your mindset and your narrative, because again, your harmful, intolerant ideology is being rejected by everybody. This is what John Knowlton said about it. That's the article out of Splinter News yesterday, where literally they talk about Trump administration officials should be glad that they're only getting hollered outside restaurants, and basically saying that it needs to get more extreme. Then he goes on to talk about domestic bombings. Gee, what kind of connection is he making there? But again, this is what John Nolte said about the situation in his article today. He said, what the left and the media are doing is testing us, testing how far they can go, how much we will take, how ugly they can get. They're also hoping to normalize this violent behavior in the eyes of the public. They want us to get as used to it, to see it as the status quo. So they're trying to normalize this. Again, if they can normalize it that calling for violence is a legitimate form of political discourse, what's the next stage? Gee, I wonder. He goes on to say the left cannot win at the ballot box. Their media no longer have the power to persuade. Their elected officials are completely out of ideas other than socialism. So now they turn to violence. And again, that's exactly it. You talk about violent rhetoric during the Obama era. I mean, it was there in the background, but it was nowhere near the levels we see now. And it certainly wasn't being legitimized by centrists, by the mainstream media on the right, if you want to talk about Fox News or whoever, like it is being legitimized by the big media, by the hysterical media on the left right now. But Conrad Black came out today in an interview, and I talked about this with Alex earlier. This is a guy who was a former Bilderberg steering committee member. Again, he was part of the elite. At least he had one foot in the elite. Conrad Black, former newspaper magnate. He owned a bunch of papers around the world. Big former globalist, now apparently changed course. He said that Donald Trump has launched a bloodless civil war against the establishment and basically makes the point that he's winning. Here's the clip.
What was needed was a bloodless civil war to clean up the Washington sleaze factory. The entire government of the United States had become a shambles. Let me remind you, in the previous 20 years, you had the greatest economic crisis since the 1930s, brought on by bad American policy, both parties, both branches of government. You had virtually the entire conventional land forces capability of the United States militarily mired in the Middle East for 15 years in order chiefly to hand over the main influence over Iraq to Iran, which is the last thing they wanted. He produced this humanitarian crisis where millions of desperate people were scrambling for their lives and turning up on the shores of Italy and into Central Europe and so forth, all caused by utter incompetence in American policymaking. You had the decline of GDP per capita growth in the United States from 4.5% under Reagan, 3.9% under Clinton, 2% under George W. Bush, 1% under Obama. The country was a pressure cooker. Poverty went up, violence rose, discontent rose, but our great national media in the United States didn't notice it, and Trump said it is all rotten. We've got to clean it all up. Wall Street, Hollywood, the national media, the lobbyists, campaign financing, all factions of both parties, they're all useless. We've got to get rid of them. And he's doing it, and it's a war.
It's a war, and it's a war that he's winning right now, and that's why you see the desperation, the flailing hysteria from the left, and this alarming uptick in violent rhetoric. That's Conrad Black, a former Bilderberg member, former Bilderberg steering committee member, laying it down the line and actually coming over to the light side and pointing out that Trump is at war with the deep state, with the establishment, and that he's winning. And so the resistance, as they call it, which is now openly inciting harassment, intimidation, and violent attacks, they're on the side of the deep state. They're on the side of the establishment. Trump represents the opposing force. So that's the narrative we've known to be true all along. That's what they've tried to hide. Now, Conrad Black pointing out the truth. Again, I talked about it with Alex. A lot of the people who were globalists to some extent 10 years ago have now come across to the right side because people have chosen their side, and many have chosen wisely. Let's move on to some global news now with the migrant crisis. This is out of RT. Headline: Helicopters 100. Hundreds of Austrian soldiers and police officers take part in migrant deterring drills. Hundreds of Austrian soldiers and police were involved in a border protection exercise that simulated containing migrants amid fears that neighboring Germany might begin to turn away new arrivals trying to cross their frontier. So again, we've seen this massive uptick in the migrant crisis. Italy's turning away the boats. They're now going to Spain. They're now going to France, or at least trying to get there after they've docked in Spain. But now Austria have deployed 600 police, 400 soldiers, and 2 Black Hawk helicopters in an exercise which simulated arrival of hundreds of migrants on the country's border with Slovenia, local media reported. A state that in the worst case cannot protect its borders loses its credibility, Interior Minister Herbert Kickl of the far right, it says, Freedom Party told reporters. So again, they're expecting a new wave of migrants. Austria's made this pact with other Central European countries to defend their borders. The German Interior Minister is also on board with that idea. Angela Merkel isn't. There's an internal civil war, basically, within the German coalition government right now, which could lead to the end of Angela Merkel's political legacy. And Austria's ready. They're preparing for it. They're preparing for an invasion. We saw the Croatian border video a couple of days ago where they were chanting Allah Akbar, trying to break down the border to get in there. So as soon as one route gets shut off, another opens, because we still have these turncoat governments that are betraying their people. There you see the border situation in Croatia where they tried to break through while chanting Allah Akbar. But some countries are finally enforcing proper border security, given the huge problems that this has caused in virtually every European country that's accepted migrants over the past few years. Because we had the Aquarius boat dock in Spain last week. Soon as the migrants were sent to their holding locations in a town called Alicante, the local population of students who had paid for their accommodation were told they had 12 hours to get the hell out of there. Get out, you're being replaced by these migrants, and that's that. We saw that in other countries. We saw the video out of Italy with the old bed and breakfast owner literally being almost turfed out of his own home, ordered by police to allow migrants to stay there against his will, literally requisitioning his property to place migrants in there. And what results do we see from that legacy over the past 3 years? Well, here's another headline. 40-year-old migrant arrested for murdering his 16-year-old teen bride in Sweden. This was an Afghan migrant who was arrested in Iran. Again, he escaped. We saw that in Germany with the headline you just flashed up before about the 14-year-old girl being strangled, raped, and murdered in Germany. He was an Iraqi migrant who escaped. They managed to get him back and charge him. Now an Afghan migrant has been arrested in Iran for murdering his teen bride in Sweden. It was an international arrest warrant against the man who was taken back to Sweden and will face trial for the murder committed in 2016. The 40-year-old man should have been married to the 16-year-old girl, Swedish media say. In March 2016, the teen was murdered and her husband has been wanted since June that year. They found her remains buried in a wood. So yet another murder of a young teenage girl blamed on migrants in a major European country. Because we had the whole narrative last week about, oh, Trump's lying when he says that crime's risen in Germany. Well, if you'd have put the word violent, or if you'd have put the word migrant behind the word crime in that tweet, you would have been completely right. Because as Reuters admitted, as numerous other big publications admitted, BBC admitted, as you see there, the rise in violent crime, the rise in political crime in Germany as well, talking about attacks on Jewish people mainly, can largely, in some cases, 90% of it be attributed to migrants. That's why when Trump talks about Europe having huge problems as a result of open borders, he's exactly right. Meanwhile, in Italy, Italian Eurosceptic coalition polling at nearly 60%. Italy's new Eurosceptic anti-mass migration coalition continues to enjoy large support. Now they've got up to 60% of the vote. This is the new coalition government. Liga alone were at 17% back in March. Now they're at 29%. They've almost doubled their support, specifically as a result of Salvini enforcing proper border security, turning away these boats, and making Italy great again. And that's what Donald Trump wants to follow with his legacy when it comes to the border. That's going to wrap it up for the fourth hour. Coming up, War Room with Owen Schroyer. Breaking news at Infowars.com. We'll be back.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
The globalists are losing, but they're doubling down their attacks. There's one thing they fear, and it's people power. InfoWars has defeated their censorship so far only because of you spreading the links, spreading the articles, subscribing, clicking the notification buttons, and getting the articles and videos out. But they are intensifying their censorship, so now it's more important than ever to ensure we keep the First Amendment alive and well right here in America and free speech worldwide. So from Australia to countries in Africa, to Europe, to Mexico, to right here in the USA, I salute you all for taking action and defending free speech. We will prevail. Extendowise, the latest product from InfoWarsLife.com, fuses all the known compounds that have been proven to be good for our hearts and cardiovascular system. And listen, everybody's got a heart. Well, actually, maybe Hillary and George Soros don't, but everybody else has a heart, and this product is amazing. So, if you have a heart and you want the very best product out there that's designed to aid a healthy heart and cardiovascular system, it's Extendowise, available at InfoWarsLife.com. And like all of our products are game changers, this baby is the most souped up, awesome version the top formulators can come up with and still be affordable. It's one of the very best heart pills out there. It's Extendowise. So get some for yourself and family and friends. It's got the very best fish oil from the fjords. It's very, very pure, very, very clean, and has the EPA type that is specifically good for the heart, cardiovascular system. It's got the properly formulated type of CoQ10 and more. It is Extendowise, now available at InfoWarsLife.com.